Now, one of the things that we did was we did a lot of testing because EAS allows 120 characters of information and a URL. However, the new CMAS, which is going to be mandatory for all of our mobile devices, only has a limit of 90, and there's no URL. So there's a problem with where do you go get more information if you have a vision or a hearing impairment. And that becomes, well, as we know, that's already critical. But even before that stage, my husband works for FEMA, and I've told this story to a lot of people. But he was at a location, and they had a sign that said, "Blind persons, please report to Section A." And then all day long, they were giving these announcements to people who couldn't hear. So, and then they got frustrated because of the fact they couldn't figure out, well, I just announced that, how come you don't understand? So it's a big job for the federal government in the emergency communications area to make sure that people understand that all of us, as we age into disability or as we have impairments, have to be able to figure out how to get the information. And I do think universal design is an important element, and I really want to thank you, Susan, for putting it on the agenda, because as, like you said, we drill down deeper into these topic areas, there's a lot for the new generation to, and I guess that's even before the digital natives, to start looking at in issues, because there's so much going on the horizon as far as accessibility. And it's a big market. Jake's an example of that. Any other questions? Okay, well, I have a question then for the panel. We've talked a little bit about the FCC. So now I want to make you think that you're a commissioner and you have all the rights of a commissioner to make changes at the FCC. All right, well, we know now that the regulators are trying to ensure through upcoming rulemaking that people with disabilities and those that have sensory problems are able to consider product development and content development within new rulemaking. So what area would you address first? What do you think is more important as a commissioner? What agenda item would you push? So as far as universal design, making sure it makes it into product and content development.
Well, I'd love to see the FCC put a little bit of pressure on the providers, because technology exists, for example, to make set-top boxes talk. It's being done in England from Ocean Blue Technology. And this is the kind of thing where you can't easily just walk into a country and say, oh, Comcast, you got to do this. But if everybody's required to do it, and the technology exists, and you just have to get the different players together to make it happen, that could revolutionize the access to entertainment for blind people.
I guess if I was so lucky and I could sprinkle fairy dust on the problem, I love the question and the observation about electronic program guides, and we have a saying in broadcasting that the nice thing about standards is you can have so many of them. And we do have so many of them, and most of them don't talk to each other, support each other when it comes to end-user consumer experiences. So I think I would simply invite in, the 2 or 3 brightest people I know, my colleagues on the panel here, lock them in a room and say what should be the guidelines for universal design for aging Americans and for safety considerations, and then when they push the document back under the door, I'd take it into a rulemaking proceeding.
As a manufacturer, and if you haven't been on the floor, there's a lot of competition out there, and price is very important. I think that making accessible products accessible is important, but from a manufacturing standpoint, certain mandated requirements can kill small businesses. So innovation needs to have no roadblocks for all forms. So whether it is for the accessibility community or the non-accessibility community, you need to be able to move and have that type of free reign. But I think that, I guess kind of not really FCC type issue, but having grants available for small businesses to develop specific products that fit specific needs makes a lot of sense, which is exactly what NPR's engineering labs has been pushing. So I'm for knocking down barriers, but I do believe on the broadcast side it's critical, because you can't have a product that works with something if there's nothing for that to work with.
Actually, Jake, you bring up a point that I find really interesting. What about the idea of tax incentives for businesses to create new technology that's universally designed from the federal government? Because that's what the FCC can do too.
I don't have a strong position on that. I think that I think grants are a great way to go, because you get a specific product and it's specifically funded. I think that tax incentives can provide unfair advantages to larger companies that are in a better position to profit from those advantages. But again, I think that you need to have the grants and the back-end broadcasting available so us as manufacturers can work with those technologies.
Very good. Any questions from the audience? Anything else? We're about to end, and Susan's going to come up, and I think she has a question for Mike. Thank you.
So I'll ask at this time, Mike, is there any ETA on Sting?
No, I have not heard from Stevie. I've got my earpiece in, and I'm just waiting for a text back. So he may be en route. If he's not here, you'll probably see him coming into the exhibit hall sometime this afternoon. I have to pick a couple of key places to take him by and show products.
Well, with that, let's give our panel a big clap.